Ever wondered why we say baker's dozen? Well, medieval bakers weren't being generous. They were terrified of losing their heads. Let's explore a time when bread making was a dangerous game of life and death. Back in medieval England, bread wasn't just food, it was serious business. The government had these strict rules called the assize of bread, which controlled everything about bread making. Get this, if you sold bread that was too light or used cheap ingredients, you weren't just getting a slap on the wrist. First offense, public humiliation in the stocks. Second time, a hefty fine that could bankrupt you. And if you kept messing up, some bakers actually faced execution. That's why they started throwing in an extra loaf, that famous 13th one, just to make absolutely sure they wouldn't end up in hot water. Talk about high-stakes baking. But here's where it gets really wild. There was a whole secret world of medieval grain smuggling. When harvests were bad, some crafty merchants would hoard grain, driving up prices until people could barely afford bread. Smart bakers started forming underground networks, sneaking grain across county lines at night. They'd use hidden storage spots, fake delivery routes, and even hollow-bottom carts. These medieval bread rebels weren't just breaking rules. They were keeping entire communities from starving. Of course, if they got caught, they'd face some pretty nasty consequences. But for many, the risk of helping their neighbors beat a rigged system was worth it. So, how did medieval officials catch sneaky bakers trying to cheat the system? They had some seriously creative methods. Special officers called ale conners would sit on bread loaves wearing their finest leather pants. If the bread squished too much, busted. They'd also use these super precise scales called steel yards, weighing each loaf against official metal weights. And get this, some towns had this wild tradition called bread swimming. They'd toss suspicious loaves into water. If they floated, the baker was using too much air and not enough flour. The punishments were no joke either. Some bakers got dragged through town on a cart, their underweight bread hanging around their necks like a medieval version of a shame sign. When grain prices shot through the roof, some desperate bakers turned to seriously sketchy ingredients to keep their bread affordable. You wouldn't believe what ended up in medieval loaves. They mixed in sawdust, ground up bones, and even chalk to make their flour go further. Here's the really messed up part. Some of these additives actually made the bread look whiter, which people thought meant better quality. But eating this stuff was like playing Russian roulette with your digestive system. People got crazy sick, and some additives were straight up poisonous. The worst part? Poor families often had no choice but to buy this dangerous bread because it was the only thing they could afford. Talk about a medieval health crisis. When bread prices went through the roof, medieval cities exploded into chaos. In 1347, a mob in Oxford went absolutely wild, storming bakeries and throwing loaves into the streets. The crazy part? The rioters weren't just random troublemakers. They were students from the university. In London, things got even more intense. Angry crowds would grab bakers who'd been caught cheating and parade them through the streets in a cart, pelting them with their own stale bread. The riots got so bad that some cities started storing emergency grain in fortified towers. Think about that. They needed actual fortresses just to protect flour, and you thought people got upset about modern food prices. Let me tell you about the medieval version of CSI, Bread Unit. These food detectives had some wild tricks up their sleeves. The star of the show was the steel yard. Imagine a massive metal seesaw that could weigh bread down to the tiniest crumb. But my favorite has to be the bread swim test. Officials would chuck suspicious loaves into water. If they bobbed up like a duck, that bread was full of air bubbles and the baker was in big trouble. They even had this guy called the ale conner, who'd literally sit on bread while wearing special leather pants. If the bread squished too easily under his royal bottom, that baker was headed straight for the stocks. The kings of medieval England thought they had bread prices all figured out. They created this fancy system called the assize of bread, basically a medieval price control app, but on parchment. When grain prices went up, bread loaves had to shrink, and when prices dropped, loaves got bigger. Sounds smart, right? Well, it was about as effective as trying to catch rain in a colander. Bakers found endless creative ways around it. from secret midnight bakeries to mysterious grain shortages that magically appeared right when prices were supposed to drop. Even when King Henry III threatened to toss rule breakers into the deepest dungeons, the black market for bread just kept on rising like well-proofed dough. Let's talk about medieval millers, the original middlemen who played both sides like pros. These crafty operators had all sorts of sneaky schemes. They'd add water to grain sacks to make them heavier, keep the best flour for themselves, and accidentally mix cheap grains into premium wheat. My favorite trick, the handful tax, where millers would grab a small handful from each sack, but somehow their hands kept getting bigger. They even had special wide-mouthed sacks called miller's pokes designed to spill grain, which they'd secretly collect later. Bakers hated these shenanigans so much that miller became medieval slang for thief. But here's the kicker. Towns couldn't function without them, so millers kept right on scamming. Think medieval bakers were just friendly competitors? Think again. These flour-covered warriors fought epic turf wars that would make modern business rivalries look like a tea party. Different baker guilds literally drew battle lines through city streets. Cross into another guild's territory with your baguettes, and you'd better be ready for a flour-powered throwdown. Some guilds got so powerful they basically ran their cities. They controlled who could bake, where they could sell, and even made their own laws. In London, the white bakers and brown bakers had this massive feud that lasted decades. They'd sabotage each other's ovens, spread rumors about rat infestations, and even hire street gangs to protect their territory. These bread wars got so intense that the king had to step in. Ready for the wildest medieval punishments? Bread crimes got seriously creative consequences. Some bakers got dragged through town in a cart wearing their illegal loaves like a necklace. Others had to kiss the pillory, a wooden post where they'd be trapped for hours while people threw rotten food at them. In York, they made cheating bakers carry fake loaves filled with rocks, the exact weight they'd stolen from customers. And my personal favorite, the hot bread walk. Guilty bakers had to parade through town carrying burning hot loaves without dropping them. Drop a loaf, that's another hour in the stocks. Medieval justice was basically a twisted game show where the prize was keeping your head. Thanks for joining me on this wild journey through medieval bread crimes. Who knew your daily toast had such a dark history? Hit that like button, subscribe for more historical shenanigans, and share this video. Your friends need to know this stuff.